This is TWiT.
Now, we all know tensions continue to be mounted over in the Eastern European countries. We've actually seen a bunch of things starting to surface, a bunch of large surface areas of impact happening here. Now, on one front, we're seeing a lot of cyber warfare. We're seeing a steep trend there. The fears are being fueled by both a recent president and by the nature of the malicious activity directed at organizations in Ukraine over the past several months by cyber threat actors believed to be affiliated with the Russian government. Now, Russia has shown a tendency to use hybrid cyber warfare approaches. In fact, both kinetic and cyber in previous conflicts, and what's playing out currently is in line with that approach. Combined with the fact that Western nations have imposed those sanctions we've heard about, has left Russia with few options at the risk of being cut off entirely from the global financial systems. Now, much of the immediate concern is focused on a flurry of malicious activity targeted at Ukrainian organizations. We're seeing things like data wiping software against like the Ukrainian government systems and financial institutions. We are seeing BGP hacks, DNS warnings, DDoS attacks, and traffic rerouting. It's no holds bar over there. And it almost seems somewhat random, but organized in the same sense. I want to bring my co-host here in a second to talk about that. Now, let's cover some of the immediate concerns that we're hearing about. Hours before the Russian troops entered Ukraine, security researchers reported numerous Ukrainian organizations getting hit with a sophisticated new disk wiping malware. In fact, ESET, which is tracking the threat, is calling it hermetic wiper. Instead, it found traces of the malware on hundreds of systems in Ukraine. Now, Symantec reported the malware being deployed against organizations in Ukraine's defense, financial, and aviation IT service sectors. The malware appears to be designed solely to damage the MBR, the master boot record, on most Windows machines, making them unbootable and compromised. Now, we heard there's also another similar disk wiping tool called Whispergate. And in fact, we've had that kind of been in comparison with 2017's NotPetya, now, which is actually initially appeared to be ransomware that actually wipes your disk as well. So they're all kind of comparable and they're all kind of doing the same thing, but they're being used in this attack. Now, we're seeing a lot of tens of thousands of machines infected worldwide, and they're targeted mainly at Ukrainian systems. Now, concerns are also high over at new malware framework dubbed Cyclops Blink that Russian threat actor Sandworm and aka Voodoo Bear are actually using to target network devices. Now, Sandworm is the threat actor behind NotPetya outbreak, the 2015 Black Energy attack that temporarily crippled Ukrainians' power grid, and the first ever cyber weapon developed specifically to target electric systems at scale. Now, a joint advisory this week from the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, the UK's National Cybersecurity Center, the NSA and the FBI described Cyclops Blink as malware that Sandworm is now using as a replacement for its previous VPN filter to target network devices. In fact, VPN filter infected some 500,000 routers worldwide, and Cyclops Blink was developed shortly after that in 2019. Now, in keeping with previous patterns that we've seen in Russian military actions against Ukraine this week, we've seen numerous DDoS attacks targeting key government websites, including those of the Ukrainian parliament and other entities, and a Russian-linked website that served as a command and control center for the attacks was also found as hosting clones of key Ukrainian government websites, including those of the president and the Ministry of Justice. There's a lot going on over there. It seems like there's more and more every day. I want to bring my co-host back in and talk a little bit about this, what's going on. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of attacks going on in different parts of the sector. Obviously, websites, information sharing websites. We're seeing targeted government systems. Obviously, it seems like tactics to create chaos in many different parts of the sector here. Do we feel like this will continue? Where do we see this kind of impacting the Ukrainian government? Curtis, I want to throw this to you.
Well, the important thing to note is that the things that we're seeing are not specifically designed to create chaos. Chaos is the sort of thing, there are national actors who do that. Iran is noted for that, just to sort of throw little chaos bombs into systems. The stuff that we're seeing being tossed at Ukraine is designed to cripple systems, to deny IT systems to government and to the warfighters. for a variety of reasons. I mean, it is the explicit aim of this particular exercise from the Russians to enact a change in government of the Ukraine. So they are trying to cripple the current government. They are trying to deny them the ability to communicate amongst themselves and to their war fighters. We will almost certainly see more attacks sent against critical infrastructure, communications. We've already seen attacks on their 5G and cellular networks. There will be more against their power grid. And it is highly likely that we will see attacks on other energy systems as well. So these are targeted. These are designed, as I said, to deny the government and the military access to systems. Now, where things are going to get really, really interesting is if we see these same attacks sent against people perceived as being allies of the current government of Ukraine. Who might that be? Well, any member of NATO, so that's almost all of Western Europe and the U.S. And you know, the interesting thing is going to be if they pull a lot of the controls off of the malware. Most of these pieces of malware, if you look at them, they have controls embedded in the code to check and see essentially where they're running. Now, these can be fairly broad-based, where they look at things like the language running on the system or the Class A IP addresses to see what nation they're running in. Pull those off, and they become tools that can be used against any system anywhere. And if we start to see those controls being pulled off, that's when we'll know that we're moving to what amounts to cyber total warfare. It won't surprise me if we don't get there fairly soon, and that's when life gets entertaining for an awful lot of organizations across Europe and North America.
Right. I think it's good that you brought up the fact that this is not just going to impact the Ukrainian areas. Obviously, we in fact we saw the director of cybersecurity infrastructure security agency Jen Esterly actually put out shields up warning last week, knowing that all organizations in the U.S. are also at risk. The question is, what should organizations be doing at this point that they are not already doing? Oliver, what do you think?
Well, aside from what Curt said. As at PC Mag, we got the press release from CISA, shields up. I know I'm a little bit of a curmudgeon, or a wise ass, but like that doesn't actually mean anything. They did have some steps you can take, but if you read those steps, it's, from a security professional's perspective, that's business as usual. Just actually pay attention to what you're doing, right? So it's email security, it's MFA, it's data protection, it's a decent disaster recovery plan that you've actually tested, right? You have to keep watching those things and monitoring those things on a much more frequent cadence, at least until this is over. If it's over anytime soon, if you don't do vulnerability testing in addition to actually deploying vulnerability patches, then you should probably start. But basically, it's at least for the kind of people that read PC Mag, my audience, which is medium to small business, small business especially, but even medium to larger business. For us, that's 1,000 to 5,000 employees. That kind of size business. There's not a lot you can really do against the Russians. Plus, you have to also think about unless it's open warfare, there's really not a lot of upside to the Russians jumping your business. While they're fighting the Ukraine. I mean, maybe that'll happen in the future, but right now I don't think you have to lose your mind. That's just me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting here. I think you said some good things here. Is obviously pay more attention. So I like to point out a couple of things. Obviously, most organizations should have some kind of endpoint protection and anomaly detection. So that should help in some cases. That's number one. Number two is I like the fact that you're calling out, hey, be more aware. And Curtis, I'm going to get your thoughts on this as well. Like, this is kind of an education thing for users. People who are the targets for most of these attacks are usually social engineering techniques. They're ones coming through email. They're ones coming through files being downloaded. They're usually, weak passwords from users. So making them aware of this and making sure that organizations enforce better policies is probably a place to start, don't you think?
Oh, it really is. And, as Oliver said, in a very real sense, the shields up warning, while it sounds very dramatic, it boils down to, all that stuff we've been telling you for the past 10 years you should be doing in cybersecurity. Well, we mean it now. There's nothing new there. What it does say is that you should be having new conversations, reinforcing conversations with your employees, telling them to be serious about watching where email is coming from. If they have any question about any attachment, send it to the IT department. Let the IT department open it first and send it back. This is not the time to be taking great cyber adventures on your work PC at lunchtime. Don't go off and spelunking in the nether regions of the web. And in terms of what's new or what might be actually different, I would say a couple of things. One, this is a really good time to have a conversation with your software and service supply chain. Touch base with your MSSPs, with your cloud service providers, with your SaaS vendors to find out what they're doing and make sure that you are coordinating with them. If you have good teams on your active domain maintenance now, this would be a fine time to be going through and double checking all of your permissions and your user lists to see how many of your users, of their permissions, and especially your admin users or super users, how many of those accounts might be years old. If they belong to people who really should have received a gold watch by now, might be time to drop the permission level. So again, good cyber hygiene. This is a time to maintain fabulous communications with all of your providers, and just be aware that things are likely to happen. So, have all of your response mechanisms warming up and sitting in a ready to deploy state. You don't want to be caught flat-footed anytime this year.
Now, one recent thing that just came up, we've seen this a lot on Twitter and some other forums that are out there on the web, and in fact, you just brought it up before the show actually started, is the kind of the hackers wanted sign going up. Can you maybe elaborate on what's going on there?
Sure. Well, we just before airtime, I saw this, that the government of Ukraine has put out a call for people around the world to join a cyber team to help defend them against these incursions in cyberspace from Russia. They recognize that this is an area where, they really can't have too many people defending them. So they've put out a global call. It's going to be interesting to see, A, who responds, and B, whether that response remains purely defensive. Given the current the current state of mind in a lot of places, it won't surprise me if they don't have a fair number of volunteers And given the way that warfare is going these days, it will surprise me not at all if they don't turn some of that talent to offensive measures as well as defensive.
Right. Oliver, I want to throw it to you last here. I think Curtis brought up a good point. He said, don't have organizations or individual organizations spelunking or running out on the internet trying to find solutions right away. Obviously you talk to and kind of outreach to small and medium sized businesses. Is the message not to go and try something new here or implement some new technology just so they can be more secure? Is this, again, going back to your original approach of just keeping aware, and just try not to spend, extra time and money trying to implement something new at this point?
Well, ironically, we just finished our endpoint testing, our big endpoint roundup, right? So that's 10 products, and we talked to a couple of more. And one of the biggest trends we keep seeing is they keep packing more and more functionality, right? So EDS, I think you mentioned it earlier in some context, that's a rising trend. Ziff Davis actually bought a company called Viper, and back when we looked at them the first time, I think in 2019, 2020, they didn't have any. Now they're pretty close to being very competitive, right? That's all that they've been working on, along with email security. But then you talk to the product managers of those companies, not just ours, but others, and they say one of the biggest frustrations they have is all that their customers want to hear about is how can we automate it? What's the fastest way we can get it out to the endpoint and just leave it alone? We just want to, flip a switch and forget that it's there, except unless something hits us. So yeah, if you want to do something new, why don't you dig into what you have? Because a lot of these systems have a lot more muscle under them than at least their product people think that their customers are actually using. Dig in. If you don't know how to use your endpoint's EDS system or intrusion full on IDS, or I think somebody calls it XDS, whatever it's called, find out how that works. Take a class, do what you got to do, get that running. Right? If they do SSO, if they do all these other things, find them, use them. You probably already have more than you think you do. Leverage your investment.